I should start. Okay. Let's see. We'll start with Natalie Borneo.
Why did I think Mrs. Faley was going to start with me?
Because you always start with me. Let's get serious here.
Okay.
Let's
I tell you, love my group. Really appreciate Nicole, Naraj, Pilar, and Martina for sharing out so meaningfully. And I'll sum up our main points, but some of the things that we discussed in our time together was the fact that even as passionate as we are with helping others and doing advocacy work, it is so important to sit with some empathy first, to appreciate the situation that we're trying to help with. If we're able to personalize our understanding, reflecting may take us to situations in our past or our family where we've seen the need for helping others, but we've understood the emotional component. And then we're able to better serve and not blindly push people in to receive our help. So it's so important to be able to exercise that empathy muscle before we jump into the fight for others. And this contributor reflected on the personal experience of having a young person in their family labeled with OCD, but looking beyond the label of the behavior or the comical attachment that people always say, well, you know, I have OCD, and really understanding the pain and the journey of being someone coming from that angle. She is able to walk in the steps, you know, in the footprints and really help that person. There was another individual in her family who up until the prime teen years was fine, but then was in a horrific car accident and became a quadriplegic. And despite her injuries and despite all the limitations, graduated with tremendous honors and has been using her voice and her experience to fight for others. So seeing how empathy drives change is so important. Then we had another contributor who really talked about that we need to make ourselves understand that in many situations, we are as guilty of perpetuating the systemic othering of people. We jump on board with the labels, and it's up to us to challenge the perceptions with our own actions and with our words, to restrain ourselves from blindly moving on with, our desire to do something, and just really understanding what is needed in the situation again. And then another contributor said, when I really think back to Dr. Clifton's examples of how behavior changed in a group just from the actions of a handful of people or creatures making change, we need to take the model of our everyday work where we're expected to arrive at a certain time. We're expected to treat people in a certain way. We're expected to work productively. We conform to this and we see this as the norm. And we need to model this sort of change and these requirements in our everyday life and take it out of a 9-to-5 scenario only and make it, this is how I need to lead my entire life. This is how I need to treat people, just the same way I go into work, and it's a natural rhythm for me to treat my coworker with respect, to collaborate and talk together, to not always agree, but find compromise. Why can't that be patterned outside in the social world, outside of a 9-to-5, with better awareness and a little bravery to make this shift? It's quite possible for us to challenge the dysfunction outside of a traditional 9-to-5, system and make more of that the norm. And then we talked a little bit, I had a contributor who from her lens said, what this all made me think about was in our past history, in my country, we had a huge experience with someone who was a whistleblower. And she talked about Snowden, right? We all know about whistleblowers. I can talk about Norma Ray from the movie, but you know, people with the courage to stand up despite the consequences, instead of admiring them, we as society punish them. We punish them for calling out the ugly. Why are you going to ripple the wave? Why are you going to? And they are treated so harshly and so unfairly. And we just kind of say, well, they should have never said anything and they should have never done this, or why did they do that? And as a society, we have to flip that value proposition over and reward and celebrate people who are saying, that's wrong. That is not right. And I am going to say something about it until something changes. Until we as a society says yes, and stop going with the fraternal order of this or the society of this or the group of the other, and let's keep it all calm. Calm doesn't mean good, doesn't mean equitable, doesn't mean fair, doesn't mean right. Calm is a way out, and we need to call it what it is. We also talked about, when you talk about value, the society values of, you know, non-traditional versus traditional, whether it be a career. We punish people and pay them less if we don't think they conform to what the society says is the best career or the best, you know, position. In the meanwhile, we have teachers who are spending their years with our formative children, who will shape and mold them, having to fight for a living wage. We have security guards who we expect to jump in front of the robber or whatever, keep us safe, making less than the minimum wage. And so many, you know, scenarios like that. The janitors and the cleaners who make sure that we have clean spaces to work in and sit in. We don't respect that work. And, you know, so this goes to all changing our perspective just by sitting back and reflecting on the value that other people bring and how we should be regarding it. And so quickly to sum up, tap into the uncomfortable, ask before assuming, start being more courageous, know that change is possible. The collective idea can yield and impact change. Question the value system, stand up for change.
Thank you very much. We should have a poster that says that. I think that's connecting the dots right there. Dr. Clifton.
Yeah, we got a small group, but it was very informative, and we were actually talking mostly about the abuse of thinking too much, and then move towards how do we balance like quieting the mind with also taking action. So we can't do one without the other. But in order to who the members, you know, gave many examples of like turning practices into a ritual of quieting their mind. You know, there were breathing practices to quiet the mind. And ultimately there was a conclusion that, you know, and a quiet mind can be more cognizant of their authentic self, but it also can be, and in that authentic self, there's a value of other people. There's a value of empathy is just there, you know. And when we empathize and see ourselves in everybody, no matter what occupation they do, or you know, they're valued and they should be rewarded for the service that they provide to each, you know, to the society. So, and we, you know, we went over. One of the members was showing out, you know, the relationship to quieting the mind and neuroplasticity. And narration, you know, with actually stimulating parts of a paralyzed person through, you know, doing, you know, neural feedbacks on the brain, and that sort of making a movement, you know, can start to bring about a transformation of the limb, of the paralyzed limb. So it's, you know, it comes back, you know, to taking actions, and because if we think too much, it's just, no action, but actions have it, but they have to be measured actions, and actions that come out of learning, come out of being in touch with ourselves and realizing that, that our first voice is open to change, that's open to seeing things change. But, but again, this is confronted with the dilemma of certain powers don't want to see change, going back to what I was saying, like the founding fathers, they had a group of slaves and they were making a lot of money. They were actually they could even use slaves as collateral for loans. It's just insane stuff. But they were preaching, freedom. But we have to, we have to make the impact. But maybe when the majority or more people, say this is wrong, this is like impossible, this is crazy, that people can be treated with dignity and respect. And and it starts with, another thing we brought up was how Western medicine, does not give patients tasks to do for themselves, for their own healing. We need to combine, the benefits of modern medicine, but also the ancient wisdom of practices where you're responsible to do these exercises, to do this and do that, and then, you become a partnership with medicine rather than just don't worry about it, we'll take care of you. So this was a fertile discussion, and as always, I always learn a lot, and I thank people participating in this group. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that the meditations were very powerful, and I'll just mention that one person in the group and who actually spoke about the meditation said that it was really so powerful, made her think about the fact that in certain cases she doesn't have empathy and needs to develop, especially with the starving child, because the media bombards us with that image. Right, and we become immune to that. And that's a very, good point of people being aware of, separating ourselves from that level of immunity. Things kept going back to the idea of giving a person the dignity, like the homeless person, giving the person the dignity to speak for him or herself. Like if we think they're thinking one thing, or we think that they're thinking they should be someplace, or we think they're uncomfortable. For example, I'll give an example in our community of many homeless vets who are out in the cold. And then they brought in the wintertime to churches and given something to eat. And I think the people who bring them in are talking with them and staying with them. And those are just, kind of simple actions, but they make such a big difference for each individual. So that's the first thing, is giving the dignity to someone to listen. And, one person mentioned that when she was young, she was in a community, she volunteered in a community where there were homeless people and where they chose to live in places like a dump. And it was difficult to understand that, but she said, I learned from them. And then I guess that's the main point that we're bringing up here, each one of us, is that we learn from listening to others. And we have to turn our listening brain on and our judgment brain off when we're presented with a situation, a person who seems to be difficult or have values totally different from ours. And the idea that it's difficult to find hope when there is despair. And it was mentioned, especially when you're young and haven't developed different life experiences. So you have to think about developing your own life experiences along the journey of helping others, and to the extent that you can do that, because the whole purpose is for you personally to grow and change. Let's see. Here's my piece of paper. I think. And one of the main things is being grateful. being grateful, being respectful, listening, caring. And I think all of us do, and finding organizations that work for us. There are all kinds of organizations out there that we can work with, contribute to, but I think we really have to narrow it down to ones that really are meaningful for us. And each little contribution, whether it's a personal contribution or group contribution, like we've had food drives in our community. We've put together go-to bags for the day workers in Huntington. You know, these sorts of things make a little tiny difference in people's lives. And that's what we're all doing on Connecting the Dots. We're all a very strong community that just keeps growing in its understanding and its empathy because of Melanie beginning it and keeping us all together and moving forward and thinking. Every Friday we think about this and we think about, we're engaged in it. And that's really wonderful. If that's all we do for the week, we've really done something special for ourselves and for others. So thank you very much.